halfway. Good?
Yes.
Okay.
SOPA documentation, and SOPA is very near and dear to my heart, having worked with the cattle growers, and and we think that that documentation should be in the application, not just in the operating rules for oil and gas drilling. This should be up front. They should prove that they have an agreement with the surface owner, that they complied with the surface owner, and their bond, so SOPA requires bonding if there isn't an agreement with the surface owner. So we need to know that if the surface owner and the company were unable to agree. So that's extremely important. Air quality protection. It says in consultation with the Air Quality Bureau of the New Mexico Environment Department, develop an air quality performance standard plan that is in compliance with the appropriate laws, the Air Quality Control Act. The plan shall include specific regulated compounds projected to be released during oil and gas operations. It also must describe the mitigating measures to be used to reduce air emissions should they exceed federal and state standards, which could be harmful to human health, to livestock, and to wildlife. The director may increase setback requirements based on the plan. So Mike doesn't have to deal with the plan. It's the company working with the Environment Department, develops the plan, lets you all know what's going on, and if you think or you deem it important, that you may want to change some setback requirements. But that's up to you. It's all voluntary. It's nothing mandatory. Water usages and sources. This was a sensitive issue with Sandridge. Some of you may remember. Operator would take all measures necessary to avoid pollution of surface water and groundwater. And pollution, we put a definition of pollution in the definition section. The applicant shall include certification signed by an officer of the company that it will comply with the requirements of OCD and NMED concerning the protection of waters. And then here's the following information that needs to be included in the application. How much water will be used, the type of water to be used, fresh, effluent, or produced, and where the water is coming from, the source. Approval from the appropriate agency must be provided for all sources of water. There was a question, Sandridge claimed that they had it from Rio Rancho. We discovered later that they didn't. There was no letter of agreement from Rio Rancho. So have this clean. I mean, from the applicant's perspective, they should have all this lined up. Where they're getting their water, if they go through the state engineer or whatever. Non-potable water should be used whenever possible. That's not a mandate. It's just a philosophy. I think that's important for this county. Then stormwater pollution prevention plan has been in lots of the drafts, prior drafts. The August draft has a post-production terrain management plan, which clearly describes the goals for post-production land management and how those goals are to be achieved, and restoration. I'm up at Santa Fe and I listen, it's such an education. And I know that it's a tremendous problem of having abandoned wells, and it's a cost to the state. And that means that they're not doing any terrain management. And so this says, okay, what's your plan? They're required to, by a lot of different groups. The terrain management plan, for instance, on page 13D, must be submitted to the local flood control authority and the soil water conservation districts located near the well facility for their review. It's really important. We need cooperation between agencies. I think that's been a common theme that I've heard from you all. Grading and drainage plan, very important. This is added. I don't know why it was removed. Waste disposal plan. All applicant must describe the type of waste that will be generated on the site and how that waste will be properly disposed of. Agreements and permits from waste disposal facilities, including land farms and injection wells approved by OCD, must be included in the application. The plan must demonstrate compliance with the provisions of Article 6 which go into greater detail about waste disposal. But so it's not that the staff has to do anything, it's just that we have to show that the applicant has to show that they have, where the waste is going and the sites are approved by OCD. I think that's not an unreasonable request. Article 6 now, we were dealing with what's in the application. Now Article 6 is dealing, and it's not just drilling requirements, which is in point 1, I'm going to call point 2. It's general provisions for oil and gas facilities, and that's one of the reasons why we need a definition of oil and gas facilities, which you have in your prior drafts. Light direction, you all put in the requirement is 750 feet, no glaring, etc. And you just added the Night Sky Protection Act. The applicant should comply with the Night Sky Protection Act. We think the color of well site structures is not what section 6.2 should be about. It should be about visual impacts. That's really what it's about. And the Munsell soil color coding system has been referred to. We're recommending the BLM Visual Resource Management System. I went online and looked at the Munsell soil color coding system, and it's like looking at some sort of paint store. Whereas BLM actually has pictures of oil storage tanks and other facilities, and gives you a sense of what it would look like if it was painted white, or what it would look like if you could paint it as subtle color, more subtle color. And I think a visual impact is important, and you can go online and take a look at the BLM Visual Resource Management System color coding. But I would not recommend Munsell soil colors. Setback requirements, and of course, it should be standard, and it has been in your other ordinances. No oil and gas facility should be permitted within a floodplain as mapped and designated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. That needs to be in there. And then it says B, it says no person shall drill or deepen an oil and gas well. You're not just talking about an oil and gas well. You're talking about an oil and gas facility. No oil or gas facility shall be located within 700 feet of occupied dwellings, schools, churches, but there's other hospitals, clinics, assisted living homes, businesses, cemeteries, fresh water wells, water courses, acequias, archaeological and historic sites outside the incorporated municipality in the county. And we don't think that should be a given. I mean, without the written consent of the owner, there's a lot of politics involved in something like that. I don't think you want to go there. Fencing and exclusionary protocols, I don't know what you meant by exclusionary protocols, but fencing, unless provided for in an agreement with the applicable surface owner, all well site locations shall have, not just drilling and completion, but shall have perimeter fencing and a locked gate to prevent harm, because the cross-outs for your language, somehow I can't think, green shades of black, to prevent harm to the public, livestock, and wildlife. So you need, obviously, fencing. The design and construction, this is was in your standard operating procedures, and certainly was in the Rio Riva ordinance. It's the only time I think we cite from Rio Riva. The design and construction of the required fencing shall be a chain link fence to a maximum height of 6 feet as approved by the director. The director shall have a key or other access mechanisms to any lock gates on site. If you can imagine some kind of emergency happens, they need a key if they need to get in there. They should lock gate, as well as the surface owner needs a key. Best practices, that's, we think the API is fine. Trash and debris. Waste disposal, now we talked about having showing permits where you're going to dispose your waste. So this says waste disposal, all waste must be disposed of in accordance with the operator's permit agreement. On-site gas field waste must be removed from the subject site. On-site pits for oil or gas field waste are prohibited. That is a policy. You're allowed to do that under OCD. There are many ordinances that do that. And it allows the company to decide, do they want to use closed loop systems, or maybe there's some other invention out there they can decide how to do it. But pits are really very dangerous. And in fact, I remember when the pit rule was being reworked under the Richardson administration, and online there was evidence that the pits actually were contaminating groundwater. And I still have, it's probably 50 pages of spreadsheets of companies, and many of them were repeat offenders of actual groundwater contamination from pits. They're very dangerous. The pit rule has been weakened substantially since the Richardson administration, and more and more companies, even Sandridge, said they wanted to use this closed loop system. It's safer for the company. Why should they want to get into any kind of difficulty like that? Pipelines and gathering lines, 6.8 on page 14. Operator may construct pipelines, including gathering lines. I think this is not really mentioned at all in your ordinance on the approved site, but no pipeline shall exceed the size necessary for transporting oil and gas produced on the site. Applicant operator shall vary all permanent pipelines no less than 36 inches below the surface and restore the surface as nearly as possible to its former condition to a reasonable extent. Pipeline routing shall avoid exacerbating erosion. Operators shall use steel pipes in all pipelines in which pressure is anticipated to be in excess of 300 psi unless the material transported is highly corrosive, in which case other types of pipes meeting industry standards may be used. 36 inches is quite standard, and I want you to know where this language comes from. It comes from the AMREP lease with thrust energy. We pulled that out from there. And if it's good for AMREP, it's got to be good for the county. And then this is the point where I was mentioning applicant must ensure that all pipelines and gathering lines are platted and filed as built in the office of the Sandoval County Clerk. This is a real safety issue. We don't want anybody digging around and hitting pipes and gathering lines. So they should be platted and available for P&M, for home builders, for others. Storage tanks, this comes from the August draft and your standard operating procedures. Except as otherwise mandated by OCD, tanks used for the storage of condensate, crude oil, or other liquid hydrocarbons produced by and or used in conjunction with any oil and gas facilities shall conform to the API standards for such tanks. Should be no big deal. I mean, it's very important. I don't know why this was excluded. All above ground storage tanks shall be equipped with a secondary containment system as approved by NMOCD. All below grade tanks shall be constructed and maintained according to applicable NMOCD regulations. We're not adding anything. We're just saying we want proof that you're complying with this. Roads and traffic standards, this came in, taken from your August 2017 draft. Chains on heavy equipment shall not be permitted on paved county roads. All damage to county roads directly attributed to the installation, construction, and operation of oil and gas facilities shall be promptly repaired at the applicant's expense. And I hear requests from the southeastern part of New Mexico all the time for we need money because the oil and gas trucks are beating up our roads. And I think I've heard that in the Cuba area as well. And so the question is how much, and you'll see that we have a suggestion in terms of payment. Heavy equipment shall not be used on roads with ruts measuring 6 inches or more in depth. I was shocked. I drove out to the Sandridge site. There was a sign, if you don't want to drown, turn around. And the ruts were enormous. So I think this is your language that was in the August draft. We're not inventing this. Speed limits shall be set at a minimum level possible to prevent the creation of dust and erosion. The amount of traffic generated by the proposed development shall not cause public roads to operate at a level less than what can be met by current capacity and structural conditions. In the event that traffic generated by the development increases the burden on or causes a deterioration of county roads, the operator shall be required to pay a pro rata share of the costs incurred to improve the county road. The pro rata share shall be determined by the county's public works director and the applicant. So that argument, if Walmart has 1 million trucks and they're really beating up on the road, well, figure out a pro rata share based on what seems fair, and the applicant is involved. It's not dictated by the department. Well sites and facilities. This was in your March area, in your March draft that was somehow removed in the August one. The well site shall not be used for the storage of pipe or other equipment or materials except during the drilling, operating, or servicing of oil or gas wells. Where not already required by another permitting agency, the operator may seek a written exception, permission for staging of pipe or other equipment from the director, which shall be approved upon a demonstration of need for a length of time to be determined by the director and the surface property owner. Where storage permitting is authorized by another permitting agency, a copy of the storage permit or authorization may be required at the request of the director. Site dimensions for an oil or gas facility or facilities shall be the size necessary to provide a safe work area and minimize surface disturbance. This is your language, not mine. Following the completion of an oil or gas well, the pad shall be reduced to the minimal size required to operating the site, and surrounding disturbed surface shall be reclaimed. Hours of operation. This was missing in all your drafts, and it's missing in this one. It is important to declare hours of operation. An oil and gas development should be conducted only between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Upon an applicant's request, drilling, but no other activity may be permitted up to 24 hours per day if approved by the planning director, planning and zoning on a case-by-case basis. If approved for extended drilling hours, applicants shall at all times abide by the requirements established in this ordinance. Truck deliveries of equipment and materials associated with drilling or production, well servicing, site preparation, and other related work conducted on the oil or gas facilities shall be limited to the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. except in cases of fires, blowouts, explosions, and any other emergency or where the delivery equipment is necessary to mitigate the emergency. So hours of operation need to be included. The section 613 only refers to gas flaring. The actual ordinance refers to flaring and venting, so that needs to be corrected. Section 614, water protection, and this is very important, and I know near and dear to my co-conspirator here. Groundwater monitoring requirements. There's at the drilled well site, the applicant shall construct a groundwater monitoring well at approximately 100 feet from the well pad, and selected by an independent expert. The monitoring well should be designed and constructed according to NMED's monitoring well guidelines. You heard from Patrick Petria. He was talking about casing, and making the casing strong. But there's a lot of evidence and a very interesting BLM study in New Mexico that shows that casings can be faulty and that you can have contamination of groundwater and on those sites. So why not set up a well monitor so that if something happens, the oil companies don't want to lose oil, and the public doesn't want oil in their well. So, catching it right away seems to be important. So then you have to have a baseline. Prior to drilling and production, groundwater samples need to be taken. And they should, samples shall establish the site-specific baseline for analytes monitored in the New Mexico Groundwater Standards Act. Methane, which is a real problem in water, and for a set of chemicals anticipated to be used in drilling, completion, and production. The issue of chemicals used in fracking is a very proprietary one for the companies. So what this group thought was, well, do a little set of chemicals, because the company chooses a set of chemicals, and so it's not saying these are the chemicals, these are the portions. But here, let's test for these specific ones to see where they go. Samples from the groundwater monitoring well at the well site shall be conducted and analyzed. We're going to change that quarterly because we had heard quarterly from a county commissioner, new county commissioner, who now has concerns. So we would put semi-annually there instead. That's what we originally had, but we had heard from him he wanted semi-annual, quarterly. So quarterly should be semi-annually. Monitoring reports shall be provided to the director, OCD, and NMED. Now this is, I think, very important. If the hydrology report required under section 5.8A, and remember there was a list of reports needed to supply in the application, suggests that the oil and gas operation will not penetrate an aquifer containing potable water, the director may waive the requirement of the groundwater monitoring well at the site. So that, if it's in one of those real dry areas, you don't need to do that. If, however, during drilling operations, an aquifer containing potable water is revealed, this information shall be immediately reported to the director, and a monitoring well shall be required before production operation continues. The oil and gas people should know this. It's very important. They're losing oil, gas. Now we're dealing with private wells and public wells near the drilling site. Each private and public water well within 1/2 mile of the drilling well site must be sampled prior to oil and gas drilling and production to establish baseline information. I heard from Wally Drangmeister from the New Mexico Oil Conservation Division. He said at a public hearing that Makita led, it was that's standard practice that the Oil and Gas Association thinks is really good, is to sample private wells and public wells, although he didn't give a distance. We said 1/2 mile. The baseline testing results shall be reported to the appropriate water well owner, to the director, NMOCD, and to NMED. Now, Drangmeister said that there are some well owners who don't want to do well testing. So we put in here, if the water well owner refuses to have the operator test the well, and this is at the operator's expense, the owner shall sign a form to be developed by the director. So the operator doesn't, the private well owner or the well owner doesn't have to do this, but we want on record, and certainly the company wanted on record that it was refused. Then you get, from groundwater, you get into surface water monitoring requirements. Permanent surface water sources, including rivers and streams within 1 mile of the well site, shall be sampled prior to oil and gas drilling and production to establish baseline information. And then all of this has to be done by an independent consultant selected by the director and whose services are paid for by the operator. I think what's important in the private and public wells near the drilling site is all baseline. In other words, it's up to the well owner to continue doing sampling if they want to, but the company is just going to do the baseline. And that protects the company because we'll have the baseline information when somebody claims down the pipe, hey, you polluted my well. At least they can say, here's this record, and you really have methane in your well, you really have this in your well, and here's the evidence for it. It's a win-win for everybody, I think. Now, in the event that monitoring samples at the drilling well site indicate a potential violation of the New Mexico Water Quality Control Act or U.S. Clean Water Act standards, the operator shall have the test repeated. If the violation is confirmed by the laboratory, the operator shall immediately take measures to reduce these contaminants to acceptable legal standards. The operator shall immediately notify private and public well owners within 1/2 mile of the monitoring well, as well as the director, NMED, and NMOCD, and inform them about the results of the tests and the measures taken to reduce contaminant to acceptable legal standards. Let's stop cases, it's legal cases. Let's get these things ordered in an orderly fashion, done, because they happen, unfortunately. The operator shall provide ongoing reports to the director, and I'm talking about you, Mike, of course, NMED and OCD regarding potential violations and the measures that are being taken and the results. Then we get into air quality, and here there's the air quality performance standard plan. And the operator shall, at his own expense, contract with an independent air quality specialist in laboratories selected by the director. A baseline air quality testing program shall be conducted at the well site prior to commencing operations and followed by an ongoing monitoring program to detect possible changes in air quality. Air monitoring, unlike water testing, should be continuous, conducted 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You need baseline monitoring results, and those need to be provided to the director, OCD, and NMED. And in the event that the monitoring indicates a potential violation of Air Quality Act emission standards, the operator, it's not OCD or anybody else, operator should perform a site inspection of the facility. The results, including how the inspection was performed, shall be through infrared cameras or however else they did it, shall be reported to the director, NMOCD, and NMED. If the increased emissions are confirmed, I don't have this proofreading staff that Legislative Council has. By the inspection, the operator shall immediately take measures to reduce these emissions to below acceptable standards. The operator shall provide ongoing reports to the director and NMED and OCD regarding the potential violations and the measures that are being taken and the final results. Then we've included cultural, historical, and archaeological sites. There are the registered sites, but there's a lot of unknown sites in San Diego County. And there are laws about that. In the event that a cultural, historical, or archaeological site, including unmarked burial grounds, is discovered or identified during any phase of developing with the well site or the construction of roads, the operator should comply with all applicable local, state, and federal regulations. It's really critical because we have a very rich county that may have some Spanish archaeological sites, and certainly unmarked burial sites. It's very sensitive. Abandonment, plugging, and remediation. Again, this is the operator shall include a written certification that all gathering lines have been removed, etc. That's fairly standard. C, please delete. You should not have that in your, because we have a different, totally different 25-year thing. We have a whole different approach to this. So delete C. Soils and terrain management. This comes from your August 2017 draft and your standard operating procedures. It deals with drainage and erosion, vegetation, restoration. This is just important stuff to get our county looking beautiful again. And then they notify the county 10 days in advance. That's your new insurance requirements are totally inadequate in this. I know with the Carlsbad Brine well, and there's a big battle going on, Carlsbad and Eddy County want the state to pay for it, the state wants Carlsbad and Eddy County. We're talking, I mean, just $25 million for an assessment and maybe $100 million or more dollars for cleanup.
Are we on page 20 now?
On page 20, yes. Did I miss a page?
Yes. He just kind of ran through, but maybe 7.3.
No, 617 is abandonment, plugging, and remediation, and 6.18 deals with soils. You know, that's all the soils and terrain management, and that comes from the August 2017 draft and the SOPs. That language, I mean, all the work that the staff did is important, and it's good language. So then the insurance requirements is page 20 on Article 7. And here is where the county can get left holding the bag. I mean, there is really important. And so you have, the first sections are, you know, to whom the policy needs to be written, et cetera. And you have a standard commercial general liability policy, which includes fire, that you've added that. We think $25 million per occurrence for bodily injury and property damage is more than reasonable. I mean, $5 million is not enough. Then you have this in the standard operating procedures, which is also pollution insurance policy. And that, I mean, you're really potentially talking to the state. Doesn't clean up all those polluted sites. So, I mean, this is important. It's $30 million per occurrence. And, but then there's a caveat in here that a separate is B, 21. A separate policy is not required if pollution coverage is included and added into the comprehensive general liability insurance policy required by the prior section. In this case, the coverage shall not be less than 50 million. So you're adding in the environmental policy into the general liability policy. So it seems that your original number of 5 million, and we're saying it should have been 25 million, needs to be upped, because you're including pollution. And pollution, these days, cleaning up pollution is not cheap. In the Sandridge report, the second Sandridge report, which your staff wrote on January 28, 2016, there was, they spelled out all these insurance policies, but they included another one that you really should consider. And that is site remediation financial assurance. And it's called assurance because it's money. It's a bond that you would be in your name or a letter of credit. So you have this money. That's what A and B are about. And then D is new, except for the requirement under subsection D. The county shall release the financial assurance. This was your language that would release it. Deposited pursuant to this. So I'm a well owner, I remediate, I do all that I'm supposed to do. I should get the money back. I've done it out of my own pocket. But we put in E that if the county and the operator shall agree that a specific amount of the financial assurance to be released shall be retained by the county to pay for an inspection of the site every 3 years for 12 years. If there is a change of operator of the well site in accordance with 7.4D of this ordinance, the full financial assurance may be released. Obviously, if the owner is changed, the prior owner will get his money back and you get it from the new owner. But the idea is that you've got some way of paying, you've got this bond, and it will be returned with an agreement between the county and the operator. It's not just the county saying this is it, to pay for an inspection of the site every 3 years for 12 years. Why is this important? I just looked up the fiscal impact report that OCD is required. And they have, this past quarter, they have actually plugged 10 wells. Their target, and this is the third quarter, their target is 30 wells. Then you go on the website of OCD, and you look up inactive wells. 2,495 wells. Now, some of them have temporary permits, so I mean, I couldn't factor that somehow, so that it would be less than this number. But even if there are 1,000 wells out there that need to be plugged, that fund is so limited, that oil and gas reclamation fund at the state level. So it is very important that the county have some additional financial resources, and in discussions with OCD, they are thrilled if the county wants to add to the financial requirements. They really are, to the insurance requirements. And there are lots of dangers when wells are inactive. In fact, they are the most dangerous time. And this is pretty, and the other thing you need to know is that the state has, for reclamation, a $50,000 blanket plugging bond for all of the operators' wells. Doesn't matter the number, one or whatever. And this hasn't been changed since 1978. And I know, I personally have been lobbying to try and change those numbers, and I was really glad to hear that OCD wants to work with us to figure out how to deal with this problem and see if we can't get something better. But that is much more relevant to current costs than 1978. There's some other problems, but I won't go into it because that's more complicated. But the county should have require reclamation assurance is no question. Variances, we deleted the language in there, the $50 immunity fee, and we adapted this from the comprehensive zoning ordinance. Any request for approval of a variance shall be submitted to the director with the appropriate filing fee on an application form prescribed by the director. In addition, the applicant shall submit to the director such information as may be reasonably required to determine whether the requested variance is consistent with the intent and purpose of this ordinance. At such time, the director shall transmit the application and any supplementary information to you, the Planning and Zoning Commission, for review and public hearing. The public have a right to know. Fees should be determined by the director and may include outside consulting costs paid for by the applicant. A variance can be very, very complicated, like sound. And it is important for the director to have the discretion to decide whether he needs an outside consultant, and that would be paid for by the applicant and should be included in that. And then the required information is all, and the criteria is all that was in the original .1, .2, whatever the last version. Article 9 deals with procedures and fees. We added, we think it's important that the director shall review the permit application not only for completeness, but that it complies with the requirements of the ordinance. And then in B, again, it comply in the event, it's all these, you were talking about 10 working days. We think it should be 30. This is complicated stuff. 10 days, I suppose if you're considering permissive and you just have a checklist, as Mike described, that's a simple checklist. But this industry has enormous impacts on local communities, and the local communities that plan and welcome it. And you look at Colorado certainly has a thriving oil and gas industry. Alberta does, and they have really good regulations. So it's not something that one should ever fear. The oil and gas industry knows full well how to comply with these. In the event that the planning and zoning director determines the permit application is complete and complies with the requirements, so the director no longer has the power to authorize the permit. So that's what that's crossed out for. So the director shall submit the application and supplementary materials for review and to the Planning and Zoning Commission for recommendation. Because it's a special use, you would review it, make a recommendation to the Zoning Commission. If this were conditional use, you just go to you. And then we just do 30 days. And we allow the applicant 30 days to actually gather together any missing materials. Just, it's fair. I think Mike sort of said 10 days for them, 10 days for us, but we think it should be 30 and 30. And if the applicant fails to submit the required information within 30 working days, the application is automatically withdrawn. It just needs to be very clear. And fees, you have added in the event that the applicant is required to provide additional information to resolve permit application insufficiencies, additional fees may be required because the applicant may be presenting you with new information that you may need additional fees for. And then the appeal, of course, we changed because the appeal isn't to you, it's to the Board of County Commissioners. Enforcement needs, this is very important changes that we're recommending. Non-compliance, that's your language, in the event of failure by the operator to comply with the ordinance and the permit conditions. It's not just the ordinance, your permit is a contract. And that has to be a part of the enforcement. I know you figured out at least what you wanted to put in, but we were saying a maximum of 30 days, if you want to say 33 days, whatever. Violations, now this is a very new approach to your violations. And believe me, it's a major problem, and the Secretary of Energy, Minerals and Natural Resources talked a lot about toolboxes and how you get people to be good actors, and encourage them to be good actors, because prevention is so much better than the other alternatives. So there are two types of violations, minor violations and major ones. So in the minor one, it's, again, violating the ordinance or any provision of of the special use permit granted under the ordinance, and such violation does not directly cause material harm to the public health, safety of county residents, the environment, the planning and zoning division director will issue the citation. And then they'll be sent a cease and desist letter and told that they have the 30 days to mitigate the violation. That's already your language. Now, if the operator fails to comply with the cease and desist order, a citation shall be sent. And then all your language is in there. And the fine for violating subsection 10.2 section A shall not exceed $300 or the maximum legally allowable. $300. I mean, if you fail to fill out a certain form, this is like Colorado considers as the paperwork violations. Now, major. When a violation of the Sanibel County Oil and Gas Ordinance and provisions of the special use permit results in a significant public safety, health, or environment risk and violates county laws, permittee shall be sent a cease and desist letter, giving the permittee 30 days or less, depending on the seriousness of the alleged violation. If they're polluting water, if they're doing something, you may not want to do that in 30 days. Wait 30 days, and in which to correct the violation. The permittee must immediately cure the alleged violation, and then failing to do so may result in the permittee receiving a summons for violating the Sanibel County Oil and Gas Ordinance and the provisions of the permit, and having the permit suspended or revoked. That is a major tool, and the oil and gas industry would stand up at this last session and say, well, you could, to OCD, you can already suspend or revoke our permit. We don't need higher financial penalties. Well, suspension or revoke is a very serious, because the operator is losing money, and also the state is. And so it's a serious thing. And it's not something that should be loosely done. So the director then, there's due process. The director may revoke or suspend the permit after notice and an opportunity for a public hearing. In assessing whether to suspend or revoke the permit, the division may consider the seriousness of the violation and any good faith efforts to comply with the applicable requirements. So that the operator has a chance to make his case. And that due process is really important before such a serious step will be taken. Then, violation citations under subsection A or B, it's not may, but shall be issued. And we think it should be to the permittee. Had discussions with a lot of environmental agencies and others, and it's the, in fact, we had one with OCD, and it's they go after the operator. Let the operator go after the contractor, but they go after the operator. And so that's why the language of the permittee, and in fact throughout this, you actually refer to permittee throughout this. So be clear that you're not talking about the occupier of the land or the surface owner or some subcontractor. It's the permittee that you go after. And then there's notices of decisions, non-conformities. That's not in here. That should be standard information included in the ordinance of this import. So I think that's it.